Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for FatCon, the world's very first conference celebrating fatness and fatties? The event's set to be held in Philadelphia in late 2023, but it seems to have started a bit of a trend, because there's another FatCon being held in Seattle in early 2024. That one's set to feature keynote speakers, panels and workshops, a roundtable discussion, and a Sunday brunch and fashion show. Geez, wouldn't you love to be the caterer who wins that tender? But going back to the Philadelphia FatCon, the Washington Examiner says Philadelphia is hosting FatCon, the first conference to celebrate overweight people. The contemporary craze for people to be their authentic selves is about to reach new levels of absolute absurdity. 3 women from Philadelphia have decided to hold FatCon, the first of its kind conference for fat people. Why? To let people know there are a ton of fat people in Philly who are perfectly fine with who they are, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer. Philadelphia is known for its cheesesteaks, hoagies, roast pork sandwiches, scrapple, pizza, water ice, soft pretzels, or any culinary treat sold at one of the city's zillion Italian bakeries. No one needed a conference to know there are many fat people here. It's something anyone could realise by taking a stroll around the city. The organisers aimed for the conference to be a judgment-free event, focused on creating a community for fat people by fat people, recognising those who are often overlooked because of their size, and an opportunity to navigate this fat-phobic world and society in a different way. The conference will supposedly feature panels discussing fashion, navigating fat phobia, social media influencing, and a keynote speaker known as the Fat Sex Therapist. And we are going to have a look at this keynote speaker and explore some of her views. Now, I just can't understand why there'd be a conference celebrating something inherently bad. Being super fat is bad. It's bad for your health. What's next? FentaCon? Head-on collision con? AIDS con? It just doesn't make sense.
Does it make sense? No.
Now, I've done a video on this keynote speaker, the Fat Sex Therapist, before. You can find a link to that in the description. But let's get a taste of some of her more recent wisdom. Here we go.
My name is Sonalee Rashatwar. I use she and they pronouns because I identify as non-binary. And I'm popularly known on Instagram as the Fat Sex Therapist. I am a super fat, queer, bisexual, non-binary, East Coast for life, cat mom, plant dad.
Oh, hi Sonalee, my name's Bearing. I go by he, him pronouns because I'm normal. I laugh at shit on the internet. I'm a real dad, and I'm here to receive some fat sex therapy.
Typically, the way that we understand fat phobia as a structure is the same way that we would understand any other type of body-based oppression. And so when I say structure, I mean that there are 2 levels of fat phobia.
Well, I don't think anyone's scared of fat people, so it's not really a phobia, is it? A lot of people aren't attracted to fat people, but that's different. And I don't think there's 2 levels to that. You either are or you aren't.
That's the individual level and the systemic level of fat phobia. And within each of these, there are 2 separate types of individual and systemic fat phobia.
You're making this really, really complicated. So there's 2 levels of individual fat phobia and 2 levels of systemic fat phobia. That's a pretty complicated way of saying people don't want to go out with you.
So in the individual level, there's internalized fat phobia and interpersonal fat phobia. And within the systemic level of fat phobia, there is institutional fat phobia and structural fat phobia.
Institutional fat phobia and structural fat phobia. I bet you're going to define the 2 really clearly, aren't you? With your structural systems of systemic fat phobia systems of structure.
I find that this 4-tiered system is really important for us to really understand when we're trying to dissect the different ways that fat phobia exists across a structure laterally. Because oftentimes we only get stuck thinking about fat phobia as someone called me fat on the internet.
You call yourself fat on the internet. We don't need to do it.
Or, my aunt commented on how much weight I gained when I saw her at Thanksgiving.
Thanks-taking? I think she means Thanksgiving. But let's be honest, she's there to take. She's there to take all that turkey.
But also the institutional ways that institutions create unfair policies and discriminatory practices that perpetuate fat phobia, and how those practices happen across institutions to create structural fat phobia.
Fucking institutional structural fat phobia. I've got no idea what she's talking about. What institution is structurally fat phobic? You've got those motorised carts at the supermarket. Every waiting room's got that fat seat. You know, the one that looks like a little couch. There's extra large beds in hospitals. There's ramps and defibrillators everywhere. The only type of structural fat phobia I can think of is if they actually built a structure with a doorway that isn't 6 feet wide.
We see this often in medical offices, we see it in insurance companies, we see it on airplanes. That's kind of what we think of when we think of structural fat phobia.
Okay, medical offices, insurance companies, and planes. So I think what she's talking about is when the doctor says, hey, listen, you're too fat, you might want to lose some weight or you're going to die. She's thinking about when the insurance company says, hey, you're like the size of a small house and it's too much of a risk to insure you. Or if we do, your premium's going to be super high because you're super fat. And planes, she's talking about that two-seat thing and toilets not being big enough. They're not going to repurpose the aviation industry because you're too fat.
We think of fat folks who lose their jobs to being fat. I think about fat folks who get kicked off planes. I think of fat folks who get denied insurance coverage or medical care.
I don't think anyone really loses their job for being too fat. They lose their jobs because they can't do their jobs because they're too fat. And being denied a medical procedure is just a risk thing. Like if you wanted some type of cosmetic surgery and the risk is that your heart's going to fail on the operating table, it's kind of understandable when a doctor says, no, I'm not going to do this procedure.
Due to their BMI status, the BMI number assigned to them, they're often refused things like top surgery or fertility treatment.
Yeah, elective surgeries. Top surgery is cosmetic surgery. Fertility treatment is elective.
I experience internalized fat phobia anytime I imagine that my life would just magically be easier if I were X number of pounds lighter.
It would be easier. You'd get around easier. You wouldn't always be out of breath. And you probably wouldn't have this chip on your shoulder like you do.
It's important for us to acknowledge that the actual roots of fat phobia come from anti-blackness and colonization.
Okay, fat phobia comes from anti-blackness and colonisation. You heard it here first. I can't wait to hear her reasoning behind this.
Through European colonization of West Africa, there was this specific usage of fat phobia in order to establish a hierarchy of civilized white European and fat, savage, black slaves.
What? Fat, savage, black slaves? How many fat, savage, black slaves were there? I mean, I don't think the slave owners were ever hosting any all-you-can-eat buffets.
So anytime someone's criticizing a food based on its presumed nutritional quality, there is usually an inherent conversation that's subtly happening in that subtext about fat people.
Yeah, because people who eat heaps of fatty food and heaps of sugar tend to be fat people.
It's through the experience of non-consensual diets and diet trauma more broadly in general.
Non-consensual diets? Wasn't she just talking about fat African slaves? I don't think the European colonisers were making them eat a high-fat, high-sugar diet. I think they were probably given a bare minimum to achieve the level of production they wanted out of them.
Non-consensual diets can happen, especially to children, when they're placed on their bodies by adults, by caregivers. And I call them non-consensual because oftentimes children cannot consent to a diet that's not medically necessary without fully informed consent.
They're children. They don't get a say in this. My kid will eat what I provide for her. I mean, imagine your kid coming up to you and saying, hey, Dad, I don't consent to this diet. Fine, then you can have an apple instead or go fucking hungry.
What I experienced as a child was being put on diets from the ages of 8, as young as 8, 9, and 10. And I believe that I could not have consented that young to a diet.
What a warped view. I could not have consented to a diet that young. So what does that mean? If your parents don't buy you pizza or McDonald's, you haven't consented and that's some sort of violation to your body? Jesus, live in the real world.
And what I experienced was, it didn't feel good in my body. It didn't feel consensual. It did not feel good in my body.
You mean it didn't taste like pizza or McDonald's?
Sexual fetishes are not sexual preferences.
Oh, okay, we're going here now. From children's diet consent straight to sexual fetishes. Cool.
If someone were to say, well, my sexual orientation is that I am a lesbian, I will never tell a lesbian that they are discriminating against men if they are not attracted to men. What I am saying, though, is that when someone states and offers this broad statement, such as, I'm just not attracted to fat people, never have, never will be, no desire to interrogate why that statement just exists unchallenged within my brain space, those are the individuals that I want to talk to.
What's the difference? A lesbian isn't attracted to men. She doesn't want to have sex with men. Why is it any different if someone doesn't want to have sex with fat people? Are you saying this because you're fat? I think you are, aren't you? If people don't date you, it's discrimination. Lesbians are fine, but if you don't want to date me, discrimination.
So my challenge to you is, don't hide behind the excuse of sexual preference. If you're going to tell me the list of reasons why you don't date X person for Y reasons, just name it for what it is.
Okay, I don't want to date you. You are too fat. I'm not fat phobic. I'm not scared of you. I just don't want to date you.
Say that you're fat phobic. Say that you're anti-black. Say that you're struggling with some type of racism against a certain nationality or ethnicity.
Oh, okay, so everything's bigotry. If you don't date a fat person, you're fat phobic. If you don't date a black person, you're racist. I mean, this could go on and on, couldn't it?
Let me know that you're xenophobic. Let me know that you're transphobic. Let me know that you're struggling with some misogynoir. Let me know that you don't date people with addiction because you are really affected by addiction stigma.
What? No, I don't date people with addiction. That's not bigotry. You're not some bad guy if you refuse to date a fentanyl addict.
Let me know that you're whorephobic and that you don't date sex workers.
I'm whorephobic. I don't date sex workers. What the fuck? Yes, I'm whorephobic. Oh, God.
Let me know that you're anti-native and that you don't date indigenous people. Let me know that you're actually super ableist and that's why you don't date disabled people.
No, I don't date people in wheelchairs. If you want to date people in wheelchairs, that's fine. You know, each to their own. But what's next? If you don't date all of these people while you're married, then you're polyphobic. You discriminate against literally everyone in the world.
Let me know that you're a super duper Islamophobic and that's why you don't date Muslims. What I am never telling you to do is to human experiment on people by dating them and working through your fat phobia with fat people, or whatever X group of people you are wanting to work through your bigotry.
Oh, there it is, your bigotry. So now she's saying if you don't date all these people, you're a bigot. But don't date them because that would be a human experiment. Where the fuck did this person get their therapy license?
So I often work with clients who are fat, who are struggling with internalized fat phobia, and what they notice is that they're often watching porn of thin-bodied individuals, of thin, skinny, slim people.
It's because they're fat phobic. They're discriminating against other fatties. And that's bad. That's bigotry.
And when I ask them, why is that? When we interrogate that further, sometimes it is because they have a hard time finding and eroticizing fat bodies.
Yeah, a lot of people do. My God, that was just excuse after excuse after excuse. If you don't date me, you're a bigot. Now that was actually cut down quite a bit. The original video's like 20 minutes long, but she just waffles on about bullshit. Man, I'd love to be a fly on the wall at this FatCon. Imagine the questions and the cope that's going to be put forward by the audience after this person twists their brain into fat-phobic victimhood. Anyway, I can't stand any more of this. You're a brave person for watching this far. If you have any comments, leave them down below or at my super-duper gay half-stepbrother-in-law's Twitter account, bskills with 3 L's. I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta.
Recession,